Welcome to the latest episode of How I'm Building This, brought to you by Sutures and Sense, my podcast. I'm Mark Copeland. I'm the Value Analysis Whisperer. And before I jump in, I want to tell everybody I have a conflict of interest with this guest that we have in his company. I've actually they hired me to help them approach the market. Jim will talk about it in the podcast, but I want people to know this is not a commercial, but I did do work with these folks, and I want my conflicts right up front, just like all the doctors have to do in their slideshows. So, with that being said, why would anybody take the path of most resistance? Because that's what small med device companies, innovative people, and companies do. It's the path of most resistance. Welcome to Sutures and Sense, where Tegaderm meets Top Line and Surgiflow meets Soft Costs. We talk business to clinical, clinical to business. So, season 3, as you may know by now, our Sutures and Sense podcast is doing How I'm Building This. I hope Guy Raz doesn't sue me. I just hope he starts with a cease and desist letter because I'm absolutely ripping him off. It's all about the small med device companies disrupting incumbents, wrecking contracts, and sometimes upsetting our friends in supply chain. But it's all in the name of better patient care. Today's guest is my friend Jim Surek, who's the CEO of Valencia Technologies. Now, let me give you a quick 30-second backgrounder on the market that Valencia is disrupting. As you can see, I'm looking at my notes. So, urinary urge incontinence, or also known as sort of like really having to go to pee or not sure if you have to, really struggling, having an overactive bladder, right? I'm going to simplify it. It's an enormous market. Globally, it looks like it's about anywhere between 4 billion and 18 billion, depending on what you lump under it. And it's growing at about 4.4% CAGR, growth over year, right? Compounded annual growth rate, which means typically that the market will double in about 13 or 14 years, if I remember my math correctly. The big incumbents in it, boy, it's broad based. It's even hard to say. I threw a couple of big names in here. Medtronic, Pfizer, Boston Scientific, Johnson & Johnson, perhaps you've heard of some of them. They're the incumbents or targets, as we like to say in the business. And here's some background on it. Let's see. There are somewhere between 20 million and 50 million people in the United States who suffer from urinary urge incontinence or sort of excitable bladder. And there are drugs, there are injections, there are neuromodulators, there's all sorts of different things, the ways to approach this. So why would anybody like Jim Surek want to tackle these Goliaths or these behemoths, if you will? What would make somebody who's smart, driven, and accomplished want to get in that kind of unfair fight? Well, let's talk to my friend Jim Surek of Valencia Technologies, and let's find out why. Okay, Jim, I'm your next door neighbor. I work for the local union pipe fitters or different industry. And we share a beer at the fence line and we're talking. And I say, hey, Jim, I know you took a job with you're CEO of this Valencia thing. What the hell is it? What do you guys sell? What is it? What's it do? And
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to explain it to me, the non-clinician, right? So hit me with it. What do you say to that person?
Yeah. It's really interesting though, is that when you're asked this question, and I'm going to put my salesperson hat on, is don't talk about your product, right? So even when I'm asked this question by somebody, if you go into your product and I was to go into what we sell, I would just have eyes glazed over because I'm going to talk about a device and this and that, right? And so really it's more of when I'm asked that question, I'm like, well, do you have family members? Do you know people, you have friends who have they're in a constant state of having to run to the restroom. They have to urinate. And, we have parents that are older and you see this, and it's aunts and uncles, because a lot of times, people consider urinary urge incontinence, because that's what we're treating,
Mm-hmm.
is just a female problem. It's a human problem. Okay. And most of the focus over the last 20, 30 years has been on women, mostly because men stay quiet, right? It's the question. You've seen these videos out there where, hey, how's everything going? Fine. Men are just fine, right?
Yep.
Right. I'm having a heart attack right now, but pass the potatoes, right? I'm fine,
Yeah.
you know? And so I have this conversation and like, so about this, you've heard about this. And they're like, yeah. And when I talk to men about it, they're all like, yeah, this is a problem. I'm always pulling over. I have to do this. I wake up 2, 3 times a night. It just becomes a part as you get older. And the interesting thing, it does happen to younger folks as well, but it's mostly, 55 and older. This starts to happen too. And women have it because of giving birth, childbearing. You create anatomical issues that occur later in life. And so that's why it's more prevalent, but it's a human problem as well. And so we're helping try to calm the bladder down, right? That's what we're
Hmm.
doing. We're trying to calm the bladder down. Some docs would say we're treating the bladder. We're trying to make it calm down, try to relax a little bit, not get so overly stimulated. And so what we're doing is we're trying to control that bladder to bring less stimulation so you don't feel that urge to run to the restroom all the time. We're not stopping you from being able to go to the bathroom. We're just stopping that feeling of having to go to the bathroom all the time. So it's a neuromodulation device. So what we're trying to do too is we're trying to help you, because most of these people that we'll talk to is a lot of these folks. You're asking me the question of, what is it? It's a device that helps calm your bladder down so you don't have to go to the restroom. It doesn't cure you. It just tries to reduce your symptoms, that this isn't occurring all the time so that you can go live your life, that you can have a more controlled life, a life of freedom,
Hmm.
not being tied to a bathroom. We'll talk, you'll hear a lot of your family members when they try to plan their trips, they plan it around restrooms. What do we try to do? We try to alleviate that pain. We try to alleviate that problem. We try to get you back to a normal life so that by calming down the bladder in a very minimally invasive, almost not, it's a surgery, but it's a procedure, a less involved procedure so that you can go on with your life. And so much so that we don't have to have a lot of interaction with your device. And
Right.
people, the question is, well, what do you mean interaction? Well, a lot of devices in neuromodulation, you have to interact with. You get a programmer, you get a charger. You're always reminded that you have this issue. Okay. Ours is a very small implantable device that actually goes into your ankle and it
What?
stimulates the tibial nerve that is
It's in.
as effective, from an
Yeah.
efficacious standpoint. There are no comparative studies, but it's almost as effective as a sacral nerve modulation system. Well, the sacral nerve system, you're implanting a battery in your back or your tushy, and you're putting wires down your spine to stimulate some nerve in there. And that device, you're unfortunately reminded about every day. And there's a lot of reprogrammings that go in. The explant revision rates are very high over the longevity of the device. And what we do is we've got this little nickel-sized stimulator
Hmm.
that goes into your ankle. Um, and it's, you walk out of there. We had a dentist that had the procedure done, got it done, walked out and went back to practice, and spent a whole day, half a day in clinic treating patients. So that's all we do. But the way in which we do it and the value in which we deliver is giving your life back and not reminding you that you have this implant in you. You set it,
Oh,
forget it, and we'll see you in 3+ years, because the battery will last, 3+ years. Um,
right.
and uh, and hopefully 91% of our patients get 2 programmings or less. And we set it, forget it, we'll see it. Go on with your life. I mean, it's that simple.
Well, it's funny, Jim, as you were describing it. I was gonna say, if I'm the next door neighbor. Now I know a little bit about neuromodulation. I knew a good bit about yours, as but I think I would have thought at first you had to implant it in my bladder. Like I would have immediately gone like, wait a minute, dude, you're buddy, you're telling me you're implanting something in my bladder. And you got to it and said, no, we're putting it in your ankle. And so I think it's good. And one of the reasons I ask inventors, founders, CEOs this question is because a lot of times your audience, when you're trying to get products approved in a health system or whatever, or a lot of times you're talking to non-clinicians,
Sure.
you're talking to people who don't necessarily know what the heck it is your product is. And that's why I liked I know you do a good job because you're a salesperson by training, and that's what we're trained to do is speak people's language and let them understand things in a way that they can
Yeah.
synthesize. So
Yeah.
I knew you'd do it. So that's pretty cool. So talk to me about the market. I know it's a
Yeah.
I know it's an enormous market. It has been predominantly, like you said, for generally speaking, for women, for the sort of sociological reasons you described. But I'm not going to tell you. I won't give too much away. I have a very close family friend, older guy, kind of like an uncle to me, and he doesn't go out much anymore.
Mhm.
And we were trying to get him out to dinner. And one of the reasons he doesn't want to go out is because he suffers from this. And here's a shocker. Nobody likes to, he doesn't like to talk about it. I'm probably talking too much about it. And so this affects millions of people. I think the
Oh,
number I
yeah.
saw in the US was 17 million. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may have a wrong
Yeah,
number.
it's actually larger than that. And so
Is it really?
what you have are um, diagnosed patients, about 23 million patients. And then you have treated patients and you have untreated patients. Now you have undiagnosed patients, and it goes up to 50 million patients in the US. They're just not diagnosed.
Right.
And they're not in the right hands of the right caregivers. So the market is incredibly large. The challenge with the market has been over 20 or 30 years is that you got to give credit where credit is due to sacral nerve stimulation coming into the market to help that patient population. But the challenge is that only, I mean, it depends on how you talk to, is there what they used to call third line therapies. And third line therapies would be a sacral nerve stimulation device, Botox, where you actually inject Botox into the bladder because you paralyze it. So you're calming it down, right?
Mm.
But there's so much that goes involved with that. Sometimes you have to self catheterize because you can't urinate because you paralyzed the bladder, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you're going to have to self catheterize, and that'll go away over time. But still, think about that. I'm not doing that, right? And then you have to come back 2 or 3 times a year. Then you have what's called PTNS, which is percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation. It works, but a patient has to come back when they first start the treatment every week for 12 weeks. Then they have to come back once a month for the rest of your life. Okay. Now insurance runs out, then you got to restart it. You got to play the reimbursement game, coverage and all that. And so, and then you got the sacral nerve stimulation. Now you throw medication on top of it. Medication is just kind of like, it's there all the time, whether, even if you're on a sacral nerve, you might have medication, Botox, you might have medication. And so what you really have, though, with medication, Botox, PTNS, and sacral nerve, those patients never leave the practice. They're always in the practice. So we've created a community within the urological practices, a community of UUI patients. And not only that, you've created a community of family members and caregivers of those patients, because a lot of times somebody has to bring them there. So you might have a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, whatever, a neighbor who's taking time out of their day of work to drive somebody to the office to get this treatment. Now you have a wait list. Most of these urology practices have a 4 to 6 month
Oh my
wait
God.
list
Yeah.
because 20 to 30% of these patients on a daily basis are UUI. So the medications work, they don't work. Some cause dementia, and it's been proven. And you have all these side effects. So patients will just stop taking the medication. Regardless, these patients just keep coming back. And so now segment out the surgeons, right? The urologists. There's not a lot of urologists that want to deal with third line therapies because it takes up so much time in their practice. You do a sacral nerve stimulation, you are tethered to that practice, and the practice is tethered to you. Okay.
Mm,
Because what they're saying, well, I got this great programmer that's going to do all these things, and we're going to move the current, we're going to make it up, we're going to bring it down, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You tell that to a 70-plus-year-old patient who's retired, and it's a Tuesday, and somebody asks their spouse, goes, what are you doing today? I don't think my sacral nerve stimulator is working. I'm going to call the rep. I'm going to call the office and make an appointment to go, right? I mean, and so they're always coming back, and I hear these stories.
right.
Well, I love my rep. He's always there, or she's always there. Why? Because they have to be there. They don't
Right.
want to be there. And so then actually your treatment for these third line therapies becomes more narrow and becomes more
Right.
focused. So when you really look at UUI, it's everywhere in every urologist office, but not every urologist office is offering these treatments because they don't want to. They don't have the staff. They can't afford to. So what we've done is we've democratized UUI procedures. So we've opened up the market to all the doctors, and many have said no thank you. But to our procedure, they're saying thank you. I have these patients. They are in my practice. I do want to get them out. I don't want them coming back. And someone will say, well, we got a 15-year battery. Well, yeah, but you're still tethered to the office, and
Right.
they're tethered to, and they're all rechargeable. So you got to sit, you're tethered to your home. What do you do if you want to go 2 hours and something happens? And, I got to bring my charger with me. I got to do this. I can't go out of town, or I forget my charger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's all
Yeah.
these things, and that always reminds you that you have this issue. And so we go to the marketplace and we're saying, if you take PTNS, Botox, sacral nerve medication, and they're all different, but they're all the same. And the reason why they're same is because from an efficacious standpoint, there are no comparative studies. The outcomes are the same, but they're the same because they keep you in the practice. We're the only device that goes, live your life. Here, go, right?
Yeah.
Get out.
Yep.
We're no better. Our results are no better than what's out there. But what we do is set you free and go live your life. We'll see you in 3 years. Come back and we'll put a new one in.
Yeah. Okay. So I have so many things I want to ask you about. Number one, I'll start on the community. And I've heard you talk about this, that you've started a community on this. And where? What, like, is it a website? Is it an actual association? Talk to me about what you guys are
So the
creating.
community is in each individual urology practice. So when we started to come out, because so when you talk, it'll be funny. I could be talking to an investor and they go, well, Medtronic or Exonics, Boston, they have all these doctors that are loyal to them. And I'm like, I'm not competing with that. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to explain the story of, no. Only 1%, less than 1% of patients ever choose a sacral nerve modulation device. Okay. So you have all these patients that say, no, thank you. I don't want a battery in me. I do not. I built a pain management business that's now Boston Scientific. And, going through that, I'm like, I never want a battery put into me. The only battery that's going in me is for a pacemaker or a defibrillator because I have to, right?
Right.
To live. But,
Right.
don't put that in me, And so, so when we're talking about this and we're talking about the community exists in the practice. And when you start to have these conversations, that's like you asked me, well, what's your product? It's not about the product. It's about what am I serving? We are serving this community that is not your fault as a urologist. It's not your fault because the medications do what they do. It's not your fault that PTNS has these reimbursement issues. You're doing your best with the technologies that you have. I'd say, would you look back 100 years and see how they were resecting brain tumors 100 years and go, wow, that was malpractice. How dare they? That's all they had, right? You're not going to judge that based on today. And so we can't judge what was done in the past based on what we have today. So we just talked to the accounts about the community, and they, like you, were like, oh, yeah, you have this community. Let's set them free, right? Give them this product, set the patient free, set your staff free, set their family members free, set your wait list free, get those new patients in. So now you want to talk about the healthcare system. Well, we're clogging up the healthcare system because we have patients not choosing third line therapies. They're choosing medication and or they'll stop taking medications because of the side effects. So free these patients up, reduce that wait list, because that wait list still has family members that are taking care of those people. Get them in. And so from an ASC side, a hospital side, a practice side, you want to see new patients, you want to do new procedures, you want to be able to generate the revenue that you need. And so when we're talking, business to clinical people and the clinical stuff to business people, we go to an ASC and we say, here's the clinical benefit of this. And these are new patients. We're not stealing sacral nerve modulation devices. We're not stealing, Botox isn't coming in your ASC anyways. So we're bringing those patients in, generating new revenue, new patient visits. We're giving better care for a longer term. And so you can tell I get really worked up about this because it's so important.
It's so important. Yeah, it's not about a little cool looking battery that goes in your ankle, although it's a delivery system. But that's the thing. Like, how many companies I work with that are like, they want to get their product approved. And what I always try to get them to some is, how about you go tell them the problem they have that you solve? And yours is not this cool little device. You come in and say, we help patients, we help their families, we help your practice, we help your ASC. And by the way, that's not mutually exclusive. Just so everybody who's listening, I know Jim knows this. You have different audiences and each one gets a win, the most important being the patient. But let's recognize their families and the patients that are waiting 6 months to get in, and the people that have to come in every week for 12 weeks. Like, that is onerous. That's a drag on patients. But, the doctors don't like it. Patients and their families can't stand it. And, and so I love this. You should be passionate about it, by the way. Like, if you weren't passionate, I'd be like, why am I even interviewing you today?
Well, here's another thing. Like, we talk about the economic financial benefit to the practice in the ASC, but let's talk about the patient. I had to fly down to Florida, and I have a daughter that lives in Florida, and we wanted to go see a specialist. And we drove to a clinic in Miami, from Fort Lauderdale to Miami. Okay. $50 to park. Okay. Right now, you and I are fortunate. We can afford $50 to park. We don't want to pay that every day, every week, but it's like, okay, $50, I can't believe it. And I'm watching the folks that are coming into this clinic going, this has got to be hard for them, to spend the $50. Now I'm going to go pay my copay. And I'm into this for $80, $90, $100. I haven't even seen the doctor yet. And now I talk to docs and they're like, oh, I have patients that come from 100 miles away. And I'm like, what? Right? 3 hours away. I'm like, so the financial benefit to a patient is no more copays, no more driving, no more taking off of work. Your family doesn't have to take off of work. They don't have to spend the gas. You just start piling this on, and you go, listen, and I'm not competing against any of these other technologies. They have their place. We're treating all the patients that say no to those therapies for whatever reason. Let's get them treated, and let's clean up the system to treat more patients so they have better lives, and you have better lives, doing this. So, but you're right. When I came into Valencia and I said, if I hear anybody say in their first call, what do you have? I have a nickel-sized stimulator. I swear to God, I will throw you out the bus, right? It's because that's not what we're selling, right? We're not selling, it's a form-fitted nickel-sized stimulator that slips nicely into your ankle that you'll never see, right? Basically never see, okay? That's not what we're selling. We're selling the value of what this creates for the doctor, the patient, the practice, the healthcare system, the families, from an economic, and here's my funnel, right? Clinic, economic, and strategic, and that operational value, right? That's that's what we're selling. And if once we have this type of conversation, you're now engaged, right? You're engaging with people. They're talking to you. They're like, okay, I didn't really realize. I knew I had this problem, but I didn't think I could fix it. And you're like, we can fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I've quoted the Surek funnel. I call it the Surek funnel. Jim doesn't. I
No,
do, because
no,
he's not arrogant like that, but it's his. Like, I remember watching it for the first time, and I was sort of using something similar. It just wasn't defined, and you defined it. I'm like, well, now I'm stealing that, but I'm
yeah,
gonna footnote Jim.
yeah.
So I do. Okay, so all right, so talk to me. You come into the company February. Is that right?
January.
January of 2025. It's now near basically October when this is going to record. You came in. It's a small med device company. It has business. You come in as new leadership, and knowing you a little bit, you come in with different strategies. But generally, you've hired people. Talk to me about your sales force. Your approach to your sales force is different than what a lot of companies do, and I actually like it. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when you say different, what do you mean by different?
Well, I think what I've seen in a lot of companies is they try to do the path of least resistance first. So they want to do, how about we have 1099s and sort
Oh,
of let them talk about this. And I actually don't, I think for small med device, I don't like that approach. I think you have to have people in the foxhole with you every single day. And I work with a guy who described it this way. Every single day that person gets up and all they do is think about, how can I go talk about our product and
yeah,
problem, right? And you don't get that with 1099s, but it's an inexpensive way to add it to somebody's bag. But
yeah,
that's not the approach you guys have taken.
yeah. And so, and the reason is, too, is when I came in, I said, we are not going to pick a fight in sacral nerve modulation, because that is not where the fight is.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's only certain many doctors, that do that procedure, and 20% of those docs do 80% of the volume. Right. It's like, that's not what we're doing. There is a blue ocean out there. And so the first thing is, we're going to go find reps that know urology. And I always say, no, I've built, like when I built the advanced bionic sales force in a pain management now in Boston, all of those reps in the first year and a half, 2 years, had no medical background. They were coming out of Pitney Bowes, some pharma reps, FedEx, ADP, and then we taught them everything we know. And we took a third of the market from Medtronic in 3 years, right? And out of folks that were literally selling FedEx 2 years earlier, right? And so you can train to it. And so, but here with urology and being a startup, we needed immediate access, right? And so you have a lot of great urology reps out there, took a lot of President's Club winners and said, we want your access, but we did not hire a sacral nerve modulation rep.
Let's take a break for a minute and talk to our sponsor, me. This podcast is brought to you by me, Mark Copeland, the Value Analysis Whisperer. Have you ever tried to get a new product, your new innovative medical device, approved in an ambulatory surgery center or hospital and failed? Have you ever thought about the amount of patients who can't get access to your innovative medical device because you can't get it approved? Have you ever thought about the clinician champions of yours who are frustrated because you and your company can't get your new product approved where they work? Of course you have. We all have had that happen. Here's the difference. Are you ready to make a change and do something about it? If so, go to my website, valueanalysisexpert.com, and click on some time with me, Mark Copeland, the Value Analysis Whisperer. You can do this. I will help. Now, back to our podcast. Well, that's what's so interesting.
Right?
That's part of what's so interesting is that you say you don't compete against it. You don't compete against it. So why would you hire the people who have been selling that? Because what people who are in the industry but don't recognize this is you're trying to go buy a book of business, basically.
Right.
That's not what you're doing.
No,
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing. We're creating a brand new market outside of conventional thinking and thought. And that's why we're talking to investors and they're like, yeah, but the sacral nerve modulation's over there. We're not competing, but you're treating the same. Yeah. Right. It's like Axonics did a tremendous job. I mean, they stole $400 million. Stole is the wrong word.
I know what you.
They converted, right? $400 million, of Medtronic business that was there for 30 years. Right. And so they did a great job doing that. And, but now what are you going to do? There's only two of you. Now you're going to fight share, go back and forth 2% a year, and the market might be growing a couple percent. It's like, that's just a terrible way to live, And what value are you bringing? Are you actually bringing value to the patient or to your stock price? Right. Because I mean, let's be honest, it's not growing. Are you really innovating? Are you doing something for you or your stock price for this? And so we looked at it and said, I'm going to hire these urology reps. We're going to train them the way we want them to sell, the way we want to position this. And like I said, one of my first slides is, if you call this a nickel-sized stimulator, I will throw you off the bus, right? Because it's not, there's no value. And because somebody said something like, okay, what if it was the size of a dime? Is that better than a nickel? What about a penny? Right? Is a penny better than a nickel, than a dime? I mean, it's like you can play this game. It's like there's no value in that. I mean, there is some form, function, and all that, but in tongue in cheek, let's be honest, we're selling value. And so what we did is we just created these folks who are calling on areas that never touched UUI patients outside of medication, a little PTNS, a little Botox, something like that, right? But we are building a market, and we are attracting these surgeons and all over urology that says, my gosh, I have a ton of these patients, but I chose years ago never to do any of those other third line therapies, right? Because I didn't want the hassle of it. But you are welcome in my clinic any day. And when you get to your business proposition, so everybody should know, we hired Mark, right? So I want everyone to know.
I already told him about that in the intro. So everybody knows I have a small conflict of interest.
Because what you're doing is right? It's the right thing to do. We also, it's non-conventional thinking. So I brought on Matthew Ray Scott, right? I brought you on, right? I'm bringing others on, doing things differently, non-conventionally, right? To look at the market from a different perspective, because if everybody is so entrenched in conventional thinking that they can't see around corners. And so we have to see around corners, and we have to navigate this area. I need critical thinking people, not somebody who goes, well, this is how I did it at, Medtronic or Boston, it's like, yeah, I don't care. I need you to go out and figure it out for us. Cause we made mistakes. We weren't perfect when we launched this thing, but now, things are becoming much more effective and efficient because we hired smart people who could think on their own,
Yeah. And they get iteratively better every day because it's all they do every day. That's like, back to your sales force. That's the thing. Like, when I don't know how many salespeople you have. Let's say you got
about 35 regional managers.
Yeah. So those are the only people on the planet talking about this, right? Like, that's it. There are some doctors maybe bringing it up, but there's nobody else out there. So everything you get is from the noise you've created.
Correct.
And your noise has to get better and better and better and better. It reminds me, I worked for a company in the late 90s between Pfizer and before I got into med device. And it was a lot like this. And they brought in a new group of salespeople because they'd hired people who came from and Jim, you could tell from the ball flight of the sales calls. If people brought up an old version competitor that was similar to your third lines, you knew you were talking the wrong way. Cause you like, man, it's my fault. And we had to change how we talked. And once the conversations and questions were different, we knew we were getting better every single day. And it sounds like what you guys are dealing with. And I'm envious of it, because that was some of the funnest selling I had. I was rep number like 49 in the country, and I had like everything except Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And so you just went out every single day and presented and got better and rapidly learned. But that's what you guys are doing that. Plus you're doing video, you're doing sort of value analysis, selling because you need it even if you're not selling necessarily into big health systems. You need it in practices. You need it in ASCs. It's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
I
But you're
love it.
yeah, but I mean, we hooked up and you brought it on because we have to sell the business side of medicine, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I started, 30 years ago selling spine for Danik, I didn't have to bring up the financials. It was all well known what was happening on that side, but today you have, the USPIs of the world, the HCAs of the world, you got private equity in some of these things. It's like you got to deal with this, and you shouldn't run from it. You need to embrace the fact they're running a business, you're running a business. Let's talk about it. But always, that's why the top of the funnel is always clinical first. Now let's talk about why economically, financially, it's better for everybody,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Including the patient and their family,
That's
which
it,
you
including
described
the
pretty well,
patient. Yeah,
which is not one I hear that much in all these companies I talk to. But hey, cutting down office visits for patients like this is great for the practice. It's also pretty good for those patients. Like
100%.
that's what's so funny that it's the business of medicine, but it's not a bad thing in this case, because I assume your pipe fitter neighbor, as he's having this conversation with you, is going like, "Hey, dude, I want your stuff. I want you because I don't
Yeah.
want to be doing all that stuff."
So this is the
Huh,
truth, is that I actually have on my phone, I have a voicemail from a neighbor who's in his 80s who wants me to call him to talk about this because we're at an event, and my partner for 30, we're going to be 33 years. She tells her friends at pickleball and tennis what we're doing, and here I'm at this dinner event, and I have 3 or 4 women come up and go, "Hey, your wife was telling me about this." And I'm sitting there having these conversations. Then they bring their husbands over, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, "This is," and it because it affects so many people. And
yeah.
if you present it away with compassion, you present it away with understanding, and present it in a way in which you believe in it, then people will adapt to it. And that's our job. How do we make your lives better?
Yeah. So I love it. I could talk to you about this. So let's talk about for a second where the company is now and where you see it in 3 to 4 years or 5 years. Um, you're hiring a bunch of people, you're training them, you're growing the business. Um, where do you see this in 5 years? And you can take that any direction you want,
Yeah.
Jim.
Well, so what I really see happening is that as we approach the market, and we expand and we go into all of urology, um, what I see is this thing really doing a hockey stick, because what has happened in parts of the country is that patients are now showing up to the urologist saying, "Hey, I want that little nickel in my ankle. My neighbor got it," right? And so it's not going to take much for this to come out and start to grow. So we're going to, get up to 70 reps plus next year. We'll have more managers. I don't know how many managers, but 3 or 4 more. But 70 some odd reps, and just continue to build it, because like I said earlier, the market is enormous. And if it's like 1% of this 23 million patients get treated, it's $1.5 billion market. It's not hard to do the math on that. And so,
No.
and what are, and our, because we're flipping neuromodulation upside down, without this, the after sales service, it's such a high component of all other devices, our reps can sell. And so we build it up in the practice, we go deep, we have to train everybody. um, then we can leave and go build new practices and keep doing that. So, you know 5 years from now, I mean, you look at some of these sacral nerve mod companies, they got 300-400 reps. I don't know how many are selling and how many are servicing, but we're going to be probably an 80% sales, 20% service. And and our obviously will be a hell of a lot more profitable just because we don't have all that service that you can't charge for. Other service companies out in the world, they charge for their service, right?
Yeah.
And
My plumber charges for the
yeah,
service, right? Just to walk in
exactly.
the door.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
No, exactly. And so with that, I mean, God, 5 years from now, I mean, who knows how big it would be, but
Yeah.
and it's also going to depend how efficient and effective. We're looking at efficiency, right? I can get you to do this procedure. And here's the other thing. We're in a category 3 environment. We excel in a category 3 because we're small and nimble and we know how to do it. And we've partnered with the right partner to do it. Um, Eventually that will become a category 1. And then eventually this will be done in an office setting. Once this thing moves to the office, that's when, it'll just, I
So
mean, I can't
explain.
even tell you quadruple, quintuple. I mean, you'll be like, hey, we can set an appointment on Friday. It's our eCoin Friday is when we do all these and set up 10 patients and do it,
Yeah, so explain to the audience the difference between category 3 and category 1. I know what
So,
you mean, but
yeah. So
yeah,
category 3 is not investigational. It's a new technology that needs to prove to the AMA and the CPT panel and the RUC committee that there's utilization and want and need in the marketplace. Once you prove that through utilization, then you go to the CPT panel, you apply for a category 1 code, which is what if you don't have to worry about reimbursement, you're a category 1, right? So hips, knees, spine, pacemakers, shoulders, even brain surgery, whatever devices, cardiac devices, they're all category 1. When you're bringing a new technology to market, you have to go through this category 3, platform. And once we get there, though, you get to category 1. The other thing is your large payers are normally not going to pay for it. So it's Medicare and Medicare Advantage, which is 80-90% of the patients anyways that we
right.
deal with. So it's fine. But then you get to that category 1, we'll probably get it in 2028. And so we get that code, then we'll move it into the office. And once you're in the office, like I said, I mean, it's, hey, we can get this done on Friday if you want to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all done under local. So
Has the category 3 been an impediment at all?
yeah, of course. I mean, you're going to
Yeah.
have, I would say 25% of facilities don't want to partake in a category 3 because they're afraid they're not going to get paid.
Okay.
Okay. So, but we do a lot to work through that, convince them, have them talk to other facilities. But because the market is so large, we don't have to really waste a lot of time, doing that. We'll come back in 6 months. We'll have you talk to other facilities. We'll have you, reach out to get comfortable with it.
So they do get paid.
They
It's
do.
just they're not confident they will.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And
Okay.
we do all
That
the
makes sense.
pre-authorization, the predetermination. If there is a denial, we will fight it 3 times to get it paid. And as long as you're documenting everything like we do, and somebody comes back and does an audit, well, we've got all the paperwork, right?
Right.
Everything is documented. You're not doing any clawbacks here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But if I understand what you're saying right now, if it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort for them to get comfortable right now, you can afford to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to other places and I'll come back.
yes.
And in 6 months, they'll see 3 other places doing it. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's much easier to be confident at that point when they've seen somebody else do it all
Yeah.
the time for. Yeah, like
Exactly.
it's standard in sales. So I was going to, I think you got, look, knock on wood, I think you guys are going to be a hockey stick too because of the blue ocean. I think because of your leadership, because of what you guys are doing. But the blue ocean part is so different and you're embracing it. And it's interesting that you had to convince, and still probably do, investors, because investors see this and they see the big boys and they say, "What are you're going head to head with them?" And I know you're not, right? But
Right.
how do you explain that to them simply? If
Well,
you get,
so yeah, so
if you're comfortable talking about,
I
it.
know. I mean, it's just real. I mean, we do what we said. When I go through the Botox, PTNS, sacral nerve modulation, it's all equivalent. There are no comparative studies. So they're equivalent in their outcomes. And now you'll have Axonics with this study, and you'll have Medtronic with this study, and you blah blah blah. And it's like, you got a comparative study? No, they're equivalent, right? And that's not your problem. The problem is only 1 to 3% of your patients are choosing any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's your problem, right? So if you can offer something that is minimally invasive and we get you out of the practice, and so you start having those conversations, and then the investors will call doctors, they'll do the research, and that's happening now where
Yeah.
doctors are getting called and they're like, yeah, no, tibial stimulation is the future, you know?
Yeah. So those therapies are all, I'm using air quotes, neuromodulation, right? Or some
Well, yeah, I
version of
mean,
it.
so whatever you're
Yeah.
modulating a nerve, so think about neuromodulation as Al Mann, the great Al Mann. He said, to me, he goes, think about it as jamming a radio signal. He started off in the aerospace industry. He was actually
Hmm.
a World War II navigator bomber.
I
So
didn't know that.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
a world famous Al Mann. Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
on the Mount Rushmore of med
Yeah,
device,
of
right?
med
Yeah.
devices, exactly. And he said it simply, Jim, all we're doing is jamming the radio signal to the brain. So if you inject Botox, well, you've paralyzed the messages going to the brain, right? PTNS is stimulation on the tibial nerve. It's been around forever, but it's the constant, usage, and sacral nerve is modulation. So we're just a different form of modulating the signals going to the brain and the bladder to calm it down, right? And so an investor asked me, "Wow, you don't got better data." I go, "Well, nobody does," right?
Right.
And it was like, and when it was a finance guy, and I was like, "Nobody does." And let me ask you, would you want a battery implanted in your back, or would you like this little thing in your ankle? Well, I would rather have the little thing in my ankle. And I'm like, and then one of the business people goes, he's right. There is no comparative data. So,
Yeah.
and so you just have to constantly, it's just like sales, the redundancy in the messaging, I always say,
Yeah.
you have to, redundantly repeat. And somebody goes, well, that is redundancy to say redundantly repeat.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The redundancy department of redundancy, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, so okay, I like that. So I want to pivot briefly to you because I was looking through your history, right? And it's and you and I've talked about this. The Medtronic or the sophomore Danik people in spine, and I think it was really Danik, right? That were they were small med device, hardcore, go get them. And you have been with small med device companies. I'm looking at this like your whole career
Mhm.
on the med device side, right? Um, and maybe you spent a little while as a bigger company, and I
They
suspect
don't
you
like me
probably
too
did
much,
not.
Mark.
I suspect you didn't like. It's just a bad fit. I'm similar
Yeah.
to Jim. That's why we get along so well. Nothing wrong with them. Nothing wrong with me.
Oh,
Just a
yeah.
bad
No,
fit. You know.
I'll tell you the truth. I won't. Right? Oh, you don't like the truth? Okay. So,
Yeah. You guys, you Chicago guys.
yeah,
But you drew from this history. You came to this company. It's
yeah.
your first CEO job, but you've been a VP of sales for small med device companies that became big in some cases,
Mhm.
right? What did you draw on from those experiences that you could apply immediately here? Maybe nothing. You and I haven't
Yeah.
talked about any of this stuff. I'm just curious.
Well, the thing is that like coming from the Danik days. So I started when it was Danik, and then it became sophomore Danik, and the ladies and gentlemen that I worked with there, I learned a tremendous amount. I was like 26 years old, when I started with them, 26, 27 years old. And I'm watching these guys and how they're operating. And really, I called it the Spartacus gang that never died. They're just warriors, right? And
Yeah.
not good looking either. So so, so it was
Present company excluded. Please
yeah, right,
continue.
right, right. And so I always say, I'm at a med device. Can't you look at my face and tell? So it was this, I'm never giving up, right? And I'm gonna win this battle, not for me, but because it's the right thing to do. That was the thing that stuck with me when we were talking about in the early days of spine product in this TSRH system that was out, okay? Texas Scottish Rite
Think so.
Hospital, right?
Yep.
So TSRH, and it had all these angles to be able to set the screw. Now it was bulky and it was kind of hard to implant. But man, we believe that was the best thing for the patient because you never had what they called the hidden demons of trying to bend a rod to perfectly sit on top of a screw or a bolt so that you didn't have those angles that would cause the product to fail and break inside a patient. So I believe that because they didn't make me believe it. They believed it so much. I believed it. And when we came out with new products, like when we came out with the Orion cervical plate, then the Atlantis cervical plate, and it was like the engineers and the passion and the belief, and then watching Ron Pickard take on the US government because of the pedicle screw litigation. Everybody in spine doesn't realize when I went into spine, everybody told me I was crazy because pedicle screws were considered off label and are class action suits everywhere.
It's the
Right?
Art Steffi. It was the whole
Art
Art Steffi story, right?
Yeah, poor
Yeah.
Art Steffi lost a ton of money
By
because
the
of
way, people should look up Art Steffi and Owlman. And if anybody wants to see a great 15-minute documentary on Art Steffi, I will send it to them
yeah,
because it is spectacular that what that guy did and was able to do, and then got his brains beaten in for a while.
yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And then you had Ron Pickard who ran Danik, sophomore Danik, all those years and never gave up. He took this to the federal government and said, "We're going to win," and they did. And that's the only reason why today that there's the unfortunately there's 200 spine companies out there. We don't need 200 spine companies, but it's the reason why spine advanced. Um, uh, Pat
Yeah.
Miles at Alpha Tech, right? Or A Tech now they call it.
Yeah.
He is a disciple of that. Pat and I started our careers off. And you look at Pat and I see him, I see Ron Pickard and every other great person that came before him embodied in him. And he's creating innovative products all the time. And so when you walk into the CEO role and this is, I'm not kidding. The second day I drove from Chicago to California with 2 dogs in the car, 3 days. I get there. First day to the office, it's like a half a day because I'm like beat. And so the next day I show up, and that's when the California fires were. A fire actually started outside the building, right? And I'm like, well, this is not a good omen,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh my
poof,
God.
there's a fire, and we had to evacuate the building. And I'm like, oh wow, I mean, this thing might be burnt to the ground tomorrow, and I got to drive all the way back.
On day 3.
On
On
day
day
3.
3.
Yeah, and so then we were hit with not hit. I was hit with, oh, by the way, we have an FDA audit coming up in 2 months. I'm like, great, I don't have a quality department. And we have a financial audit and we don't have a CFO. Okay, perfect, great, awesome. Right. And so it was right away, though, it's based on this background of being in startups. You don't go and sit and think about it, go read a book, go watch a video. You're like, okay, what are we going to do? This is what we're going to do. And we just, you just started executing, right? Reconstituted the quality program, brought back Keith McLean, who I knew for 30 years because he was at, not 30, 20 years, 20 plus years, because he was at Advanced Bionics, brought him back, right? And then we needed to get manufacturing back up and running, called Jim Robinson, who worked at Advanced Bionics, brought Jerry Schloffman back, who I knew from Advanced Bionics and who were somewhat attached to Valencia Technologies, brought R&D back, and it was just these decisions that you're like, let's go, let's go, let's go. And so everybody that's at Valencia knows, like they'll say, hey, Jim, this happened. Great. What's next? Right. It's not, I don't have time to celebrate. Right. I'm glad, that's awesome, but that's your job. Now what's next? Right. How do we keep moving this thing forward? And, and people, that's part of my personality, but it's also how I grew up,
Yeah. Well, and it's also why you're good and like and fit small med device. It's small companies, I should say. Like that's why this thing's, again, I'm going to do this until Guy Raz either congratulates me or sues me and sends me a cease and desist letter that says, hey man, I think you're ripping me off. And I'm like, oh God, yeah, I absolutely am. This is like, his podcast is called How I Built This. I'm calling it How I'm Building This. And
Yeah.
he, like, but like you're running and pushing and driving, because if you don't, nobody else will. Right?
Right.
Like it just, there's no, hey, let's spend $20 million to do a market research thing, get back to me 18 months, whether we should build a new product. No. We're going to do it right now.
Right.
We're going to find out right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that attitude is tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny is that something happened, I won't say internally, and somebody goes, I just want everyone to know that we did this in 5 months, and that's remarkable and blah, blah, blah. I called up Jerry after the meeting and I go, do they realize that's my expectation to get it done in 5 months? I go, I laid that out like this needs to be done, right? And so it's building that culture though of we are going to move fast. We're going to break things. I think Zuckerberg said that break things, but we're going to do that because we don't have a choice. Even our sales force and where we're at today and all the things that we've accomplished has only been over 5 months, and you look at it and you go, it looks like these guys have been around for a couple of years. No, but it's the attitude. It's bringing people into the company. Rich Clower is my VP of sales.
He's tremendous.
Yeah. I got Mike Siafi as my regional manager. He worked for me at Advanced Bionics. Stayed in touch with him for years. He's just doing great things. We got, different people. I don't want to just isolate those. We got a lot of great people, but it's bringing in different people with different backgrounds. And then everyone knowing I'm holding you to a high level of accountability. Oh, and by the way, this will never end. Right. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm not being mean. I'm not being rude.
No.
This is the expectation to run a very, very fast race because time is money, and we've got to execute. And, I'm not celebrating. I'll celebrate your small win for about 2 seconds and go, what's next?
I stack some more. Right. Yeah. Well, I suspect people that listen to this or watch this are going to get a sense of the energy you bring, but it's like your enthusiasm is palpable, but that's why small med device is so much fun. It's also the path of most resistance, but that's why you kind of get these muscles that are like they fire all the. No, sorry about the fire comment. Like your day 2. Sorry about that. But I mean that's those are unbelievable stories. And someday when you finally decide to sit down and stop, you're gonna have a hell of a book. And I think a hell of another success story. Those are great stories.
Yeah.
I think people should follow you guys and follow your progress because I think you're a hell of a story. I mean, and you're going to be a great American med device story, just like Danik, just like Advanced Bionics, just like pick another one. I mean, I know you sold Intellis, I think at some point when you were involved with them. Yeah, I was involved with 2 of these. I'd like to be involved with maybe one more.
Yeah.
Because you jump out of bed every day.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what's so fun. So
and the thing is though too is that there's a lot of great companies because we could fail, right? Something could happen. Something bad could happen. You never know. But there's a lot of great companies out there that end up not making it. And it's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of energy. It's just things happen. And so it's just trying to stay ahead of it as much as you possibly can and having the right attitude. And even if you fail, you hear it all the time. You just get up and you keep going, So if it was easy, everybody would do it. And you got to take failure in stride. And that's the thing is I reflect more on failure than I do on success, right? It's what do we do wrong? How do we get better? I know we did this well. That's great, but I expected that, So it's that mentality that you gotta take with yourself personally and professionally every day.
I like it. Jim, thanks. I was looking forward to this. You know how much I enjoy talking to you and working with you, and it's awesome. Anything that we can help you with out in the marketplace. If somebody wants to follow Valencia or you, where do they find it? What's your website? Where are you on LinkedIn?
So it's valenciatechnologies.com, but we still got to revamp that website. It hasn't been the priority, but you can follow me. I'm not posting much on LinkedIn. I don't want to be that guy going, "Hey, look at my shiny new product," And so it's if I'm, me, it's like if I got something to say, I'm like I'm
Yeah.
saying it, and then you might not hear from me for 2 months. But
I don't think you come across that way, by the way, as look at
yeah,
me, the shiny new you do not you come across as deeply tanned, which I questioned about, but you do not come across that any other way.
yeah,
Okay, so they can follow you on LinkedIn. They can follow valenciatechnologies.com. They can follow the company on LinkedIn.
yeah,
I'm not here to be a cheerleader for small med device, although I sometimes come across as one because I think it's where true innovation
sure,
occurs, and you're helping people who had no options, and that's not to be taken lightly. And I
yeah,
applaud you for it, buddy. I know how excited you are.
yeah.
Um,
I
well,
appreciate it.
thanks. I got Jim Surek from Valencia Technologies. Okay, so here are my 3 takeaways from my interview here with Jim Surek of Valencia Technologies. Number 1, if you're in sales, if you go back and listen to the first 5 minutes after I ask him, I'm his neighbor, tell me about this? You'll notice he spent 5 minutes talking about the problem. About 97% of the time he spent was problem based. 3% was him talking about their product. I mean, that is a master class in complex medical device sales. Frankly, any kind of medical or complex sales, but masterclass. So I really enjoyed that. Um, and if you'll notice, as Jim says to his sales organization, talk about the problem or I'll throw you off the bus. Let's be clear. Jim believes you should talk about the problem. He does it and he makes his people do it. Um, and their sales approaches, this number 3, their sales approach is definitely different. And I like that. They have a whole blue ocean to attack, and they're attacking it with different types of reps, with a different type of strategy, using different methodologies. And that is how you tack into the wind, and that is how you beat the big boys when they don't even know you're there. So thank you, Jim Surek. I love talking to you. I could have talked to you for 10 hours. I'm Mark Copeland. I'm the Value Analysis Whisperer, and we'll see you next time on How I'm Building This on Sutures and Cents.